Recently, the popularity of Seiko mods has grown tremendously. If you want to know what I think about these watches, please go and watch the video on homage and Seiko mods. But while reflecting to create these videos, I realized that Seiko is to blame for people starting to modify their watches. And it all began with the SKX, a watch highly regarded by collectors, which quickly became a classic within the watch community. The SKX was an excellent watch offering great features for its price. It had a retail price of around $200, but you got a certified diving watch that made it worth every penny, since it truly was a tank of a timepiece. Interestingly, people loved this watch so much that they wanted to feel that same excitement but with better features. And that's how the culture of modifying Seikos started. People began replacing the crystal with sapphire, the bezel with ceramic, changing the hands, the dial, and even upgrading the movement that originally came with the watch. It created a culture similar to modified cars, where you could make the watch entirely your own. However, this entire culture of Seiko modification arose because Seiko doesn't seem to listen to its customers. The SKX was always a very popular watch, but to remain popular, you need to evolve. People have always asked Seiko for better quality materials, but they don't really listen. So the market and customers said, well, if you don't want to give it to me, I will. And thus, a massive market of aftermarket parts for modifying Seiko watches was born. This includes everything from crystals, bezels, hands, dials, straps, crowns, and even fully assembled watches that became replicas or tributes. But let's be honest, people want to spend as little money as possible to get the best product they can. It was much cheaper to buy an SKX and modify it than to purchase a Seiko model that already had those features. Now, I think this market for Seiko mods and assembled watches could start to affect Seiko, because previously people bought the Seiko watch and then modified it, so Seiko continued to make money. The problem now is that there are specialized factories producing aftermarket parts like cases and everything else I mentioned before to build your own watch. Now, don't get me wrong, Seiko continues to make money because the movements are still theirs, but undoubtedly the profit margin they have from a complete watch is not the same. Moreover, I believe this market for assembled watches can impact Seiko significantly, given the new models that are appearing, which are practically replicas of much more expensive watches. And they are also fake Seiko watches because they have Seiko on the dial, but they were not made by Seiko. I can't count how many times I've been asked about the Seiko Santos or the Seiko Daytona, when people are telling me they are looking for the watch on Seiko's website, but it doesn't appear. And it is not going to appear because it is a fake watch built by someone. But how could these watches affect Seiko? And it's very, very simple. It is a brand perception problem. And at least I've seen here this in Mexico as well as in the United States, where the advertising for disassembled watches reaches a lot of people, particularly those who don't have extensive knowledge of the watch world. So when they see a watch that looks just like the Cartier Santos, but says Seiko on the dial, they're obviously going to say, hey, this looks a lot like a Cartier Santos. Why is Seiko making these things? Without knowing that it's not really Seiko producing them. So in the minds of these potential customers, Seiko becomes a brand that copies designs and makes low quality products. I believe Seiko is currently struggling to change its brand identity, at least here in Latin America, United States, and some parts of Europe. And I think this kind of thing doesn't help at all, because although Seiko is not directly to blame for this situation, as I said in the beginning, they do have something to do with it. In my point of view, which could certainly be wrong, they seem to prioritize money over brand perception. And what do I mean by this? They are essentially suppliers to their own competition, while this competition is diluting the perception of the Seiko brand. I think it's time for Seiko to start listening to its customers. They want high quality watches with good features, and the interesting thing is that they are willing to pay good money for them. And Seiko has already shown that they can do it, but they only do it with their mid-range watches. We want entry-level watches with good features, just like many other brands are doing. But tell me, what do you think?